Hi, I'm Cappy from Always in Stitches in Noblesville, Indiana, and this is part 3 of a series of videos about thread, needle, and tension. And we're calling it TNT. So it's kind of like that bomb that's going to explode when you're trying to think something through and you can't get it to work and you feel like a TNT explosion is going to happen in your head. So we've already talked about thread, which was part 1. We talked about needles, which was part 2. If you didn't see those, you might want to go back and watch those because they really will help you explain the entire process that's going to come together here when we talk about tension, which is that thing we don't want when we're crafting. Because honestly, aren't we doing this for fun? If you're not doing it for fun and it's making you tense, then let's figure out a way to make you have fun, because that's what it's all about. So I'm going to talk first tension. So there's a couple things I have to get rid of as far as the tension myth. So this, I had a home ec teacher who I get why she did it now, because I've had to teach a group of people and I understand. She always said, you never touch your tension disc. You never adjust the tension. Whatever you do, don't adjust the tension. Well, she had 30 teenage girls in a classroom and everybody messing with the tension would have thoroughly screwed up her process. So I understand. But here's the truth. You can touch your tension. You can adjust your tension. They wouldn't put a dial there if you weren't supposed to play with it. I mean, that's what it's for. So factory preset on most sewing machines is set for 50 to 60 weight thread, which is perfect if you always use 50 to 60 weight thread. But if you choose to use another weight thread in your machine, you're going to have to know how to do the dreadful thing of turning the dial. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen to my machine if I turn the dial? Well, it won't explode. It won't hurt it. That's what it's for. I encourage everybody to turn the dial. Play with it. Get some fabric, get some thread, put it in there, and see what happens if you turn that dial. It won't explode. It'll just screw it up, and then you're going to learn how to fix it. So that's the good thing, okay? So factory preset is 50 to 60 weight, and it's been like that since the 1890s, 1860s. I had an old treadle that the instruction manual was set the same way. So they've never changed the way that it's set. Okay, so this is my picture that I love, because it shows the tension between the bobbin thread and the needle thread, and it shows it as a tug of war. And I kind of want to talk about it as balance instead of tension, because tension makes me feel icky, but balance makes me feel like, oh, I want to achieve balance. Balance is a positive term where tension sounds scary. So it's really a tug of war between your bobbin and your needle to get the thread to match in the middle. And I'm going to have another little thing here to show you. I'm going to have Peter turn over here, and this is my extremely large, extremely large piece of fabric. So I have a piece of purple fabric. I have a piece of batting. I have the back of my fabric, which also happens to be purple. And I have my needle thread coming down, okay? And it's going over here and making a stitch. And my bobbin thread coming up, and it's going over here and making a stitch. Actually, it's making a stitch down here. But anyway, they want to meet right in the middle in my batting if I'm making a quilt. Or if I'm making, whatever I'm making, however many layers of fabric I have here, I want that to meet right exactly in the middle. Now, if my thread is like this, we're pretty high tech here. I know you're impressed. But if my thread pulls all the way up to the top, like this, and I can see my bobbin thread peeking through the top of my fabric, something's wrong. So there's two ways to look at this. Either this bobbin thread is way too loose, or this needle thread is way too tight. Let me move some of this out of your way. We're distracting you. Or this needle thread is pulling too tight. Typically, on your domestic sewing machine, you're not adjusting your bobbin tension. You can, but we don't usually. Our bobbin tension, we remain set. So if I get this problem, I'm going to adjust my needle tension, which is this thread, so it's not pulling against my bobbin. My needle is too tight. So I'm going to loosen that stitch so that this isn't pulling as hard, and then my stitch will meet in the middle like it's supposed to. Now, let's say my thread does this, and it's all the way down here. you can see right away this bobbin is pulling it too tight. So we have another problem. Either the bobbin is too tight or the needle is too loose. So again, my bobbin thread's my constant. I'm going to change my needle thread. I'm going to tighten it up to pull that stitch back into the middle of my fabric. Okay? So this is the tug of war between the needle and the bobbin. And when you see the place in the wrong, I want you to think about my bobbin is my constant if I'm using my sewing machine, my domestic sewing machine. This is a little different for long arm machines. That's a whole other can of worms. If I'm using a domestic sewing machine, when my thread shows up down here, either my bobbin's too tight or my needle's too loose. When my thread shows up here, my needle's too tight and my bobbin's too loose. Or my bobbin is too tight and my needle's too loose. Okay? So that's how I explain that. Okay. Not high tech, but it worked. You get the idea. So what else affects tension? Well, the thread. So I talked in the first of these series, I talked about the thread and the thread quality and how important the thread is to the tension. So I have another really high-tech example here. This is a couple of paper plates. And this is just like your tension discs on your sewing machine. So if I've got two tension discs, they're just like this. And depending on how I set my dial, and you need to read the manual on your machine, that's what it's for, it'll tell you to go up or down to make these discs go apart or together. I have a piece of thread. This is fairly thick thread. And when it's going through there, if those discs are too tight, I can't pull that thread through. It just won't go through. But if they're the right tension, it gives it a nice smooth stitch. I need to put a little something between those. Anyway, it gives me a nice stitch. You can see what I'm talking about. It's going to pull that thread through nice and even. And it'll just slide right through there the way it's supposed to. But at the same time, if I have a really thin thread, and these are really big, it's going to wobble around everywhere. So that doesn't work. And then I could have even a medium-sized thread, and I need to set it a little different so it'll go through nice and evenly. So that's what your tension discs are for, and that's why your thread size makes a huge difference as to how you set your tension. Okay? So thread, your tension is by the thread is important, by the batting. If I'm using a really densely woven batting or a densely, they blow batting in, but if the batting is really, really thick, I might need a heavier needle. I'm also going to need maybe a little more tension to push through that. Or conversely, sometimes I need a looser tension so there's enough room for that stitch to come down and catch that loop in between like it's supposed to. So that's the other thing to think about is if I've got batting in there, am I using a polyfill that's real fluffy and it's just going to go right through it? Or is it real dense and I'm going to have enough room for that tension to be a little looser so it has room to make the stitch? Fabric, am I working on leather or am I working on chiffon? If I'm working on something heavy, my tension's probably going to have to be a little looser so it has room to make the stitch. If I'm working on something very fine, I might need a tight tension so the stitches are nice and short and they connect close in that really thin product. And the condition of the machine. If your machine has not been cleaned since Grandma bought it for you for a high school gift and you're now, let's say, eating off the adult menu and the grown-up menu and maybe the 55-plus menu, and your machine's never been cleaned, you need to have it cleaned. There are parts in your machine you can't get to that only a technician can unless you're taking your machine completely apart. And if you're doing that, kudos to you, but a good running machine will give you a better product every day. There are some things you can do. You can take the machine apart where you can get the areas you can get to and take a vacuum cleaner and suck out the garbage that's in them. Please don't blow air into them with your mouth or any other device because that just pushes everything up in the machine and it's not happy. It's a bad choice. Suck this stuff out of your machine. And if it has places to be oiled, oil it. If it doesn't tell you to oil it, don't oil it because some of these newer machines, they don't need to be oiled. And when we oil them, we really give some problems long term. So keep your machine in good shape, just like anything. The more you use it, the better you should take care of it. Okay, and we're going to skip that and that because that's a little bit involved. Okay, so this is actually I mean, I did 3 videos, and this is the last 2 were the shortest ones. So this is the TNT. This is the end of the thread needle tension. If you're having issues learning how to tension your machine, come into our shop. We'll be happy to help you, especially if you bought the machine here. That's always a free service with anybody who purchases a machine. If we get into a little bit more involved, we might have to have your machine serviced. But most of the time, any machine, if it's got the right needle, the right thread, and has been well maintained, tensioning it should be very easy to do. But it is a learned skill. So I would encourage you to take it apart and play with it a little bit. But TNT shouldn't make your head explode. So when my thread and my needle and my tension and everything is the way it's supposed to be, I shouldn't be pulling my hair out. I should be smiling and happy because all my projects are getting done and they're beautiful. And I've got this nice stitch that's in the middle of my fabric that looks just like I want it to. And my projects are finishing beautifully, and they're not falling apart when I wash them, and I've done them with the right thread, so I love the way they turn out. And that's what we want for all of our customers on all their projects. So I hope this TNT video has helped you. You're welcome to comment about anything. We'll try and follow along. If you've got a comment or recommendation of some more information, we're happy to help if we possibly can. Our goal is to start offering more of these short videos for you to kind of get some information about how to make all your projects as perfect as you can possibly make them. So thanks for watching with Peter and I. He's behind the camera, done a great job, and we'll look forward to seeing you around our cutting table. Happy stitching.